August 24th, 1944, 19:30 p.m. The funny thing about liberation is that someone still has to fire the last shot. Route Nationale 20 stretched ahead, like a gray scar through farmland that had forgotten what peace looked like. Our Sherman, Romilly, painted in faded white across her bow, rolled forward with the grinding certainty of a machine that had crossed deserts and rivers and burned out villages to get here. Inside, the air tasted like diesel and sweat and the metallic tang of fear we'd all learned to ignore. The engine's roar filled every inch of space between us, a kind of violence we'd grown comfortable with. Outside, the sky over Paris glowed orange. Not sunset. Checkpoints burning. I was loader. Middle position, wedged between Bertrand at the gun and Lieutenant Devereaux in the commander's hatch above. My job was simple. Feed the cannon, don't think too hard, and try not to remember the last time I froze when it mattered. North Africa taught me that hesitation kills people you care about. Paris was supposed to teach me something else. I just didn't know it yet. Contact ahead. Devereaux's voice crackled through the intercom. Calm, always calm. Looks like a burned-out convoy. German, stay sharp. Bertrand adjusted the traverse, scanning left to right through the periscope. His hands moved with the kind of precision that came from loading shells in the dark, from knowing that 1 degree off meant the difference between a hit and a funeral. He didn't speak much. None of us did anymore. We'd learned that silence was safer than hope. Through the vision slit, I could see the wreckage. 2 trucks belly up like dead animals, smoke still curling from their frames. A motorcycle on its side, front wheels spinning lazily in the wind. No bodies. The resistance had been here first, probably. Dragged the Germans into the ditches or the woods. I didn't ask. Didn't want to know. The city sat just beyond the next rise. I could feel it more than see it. Paris, like a held breath, waiting. Driver, slow to 15, Devereaux ordered. We're not rushing into anything blind. Maurice, our driver, grunted acknowledgement. He was older than the rest of us, maybe 40, with hands that had worked vineyards before they worked tank controls. He drove like he pruned, steady, methodical, refusing to be rushed. It kept us alive more times than I could count. The tank slowed. The engine's pitch dropped. In the quiet that followed, I heard it. Church bells. Distant. Faint enough that I thought I imagined them. You hear that? I asked. Hear what? Bertrand said. Nothing. Forget it. But I knew what I heard. Bells that hadn't rung since 1940. Bells the Germans had silenced the day they marched down the Champs-Élysées in their perfect rows, their perfect boots, their perfect contempt. Bells that belonged to a Paris I wasn't sure still existed. Devereaux's voice cut through. Intelligence says German strongpoints near the École Militaire. Panzerfausts, maybe an armored car. Resistance is waiting for us at Hôtel de Ville, but we've got to punch through first. How many Germans? Maurice asked. Enough. That was the joke, wasn't it? Always enough. Never too many to ignore, never too few to feel safe. Just enough to make every street corner a coin flip between living and dying. We crested the hill. And there it was. Paris. Not the postcard version. Not the city of lights and wine and laughter I'd known before the war. This Paris was bruised. Smoke rising from a dozen fires, barricades thrown up across boulevards, buildings pockmarked with bullet holes like acne scars. But it was still Paris, still standing, still breathing. My God, Bertrand whispered. Devereaux didn't give us time to stare. Romilly, advance into the city. Resistance is expecting us. Stay tight with the column. Watch the rooftops. Watch the alleys. Watch everything. The intercom clicked off. I loaded a shell into the breech. 75 millimeter. High explosive. The weight of it felt heavier than usual, like it knew what was coming. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. That would come later, when the adrenaline wore off and the guilt crept back in. Here we go, Maurice muttered, and the tank lurched forward. The road narrowed as we entered the outskirts. Buildings closed in on both sides, apartments with shuttered windows, shops with their glass shattered, a cafe with chairs still arranged as if customers might return any second. The column behind us rumbled and clanked, a parade of steel and gasoline pretending to be an army of liberation. But liberation is a strange word when you're still carrying a gun. I thought about North Africa again, about the tank that burned, about the voice screaming my name through the smoke, about how I ran instead of staying, about how I lived and he didn't. I shook my head, forced the memory down. Not now. Not here. Through the slit, I saw movement, a shadow darting between buildings, then another. Resistance fighters, probably, or civilians, or ghosts. In war, the line between them blurred until it didn't matter anymore. Movement, 2 o'clock, Bertrand called. Friendly, Devereaux said. Resistance scouts. They're marking safe routes. Safe, another funny word. The tank rolled deeper into Paris, and the city swallowed us whole. The streets echoed with our approach, metal tracks on cobblestones, a sound that must have terrified anyone who remembered the Germans rolling in the same way 4 years ago. I wondered if they could tell the difference, if they knew we were the good ones this time. The radio crackled. Static, then a voice. All units, be advised. German columns spotted moving toward Notre Dame. Heavy resistance expected. Devereaux swore under his breath. I chambered another round. And somewhere in the distance, those bells rang again. The streets narrowed like a closing fist. Route de la Porte d'Orléans became Avenue du Général Leclerc. Then something smaller. Something I didn't recognize. The city folded in on itself. Tight corners, blind intersections, buildings leaning close enough that their shadows turned day into dusk. The column spread thin behind us. We were the tip now. First into whatever hell Paris had waiting. Slow to 10, Devereaux ordered. Eyes open. Maurice eased off the throttle. The engine's growl softened to a purr. But my heartbeat didn't. It hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape before the rest of me figured out we were in trouble. Through the vision slit, I saw them. Civilians. A dozen at first. Then more. Pouring out of doorways and alleys like water breaking through a dam. Men in threadbare suits, women clutching children, old men with tears streaming down faces carved by occupation. They weren't running from us. They were running toward us. Merde, Bertrand whispered. They came with flowers, with bottles of wine, with hands raised not in surrender but in joy. Shouting words I couldn't hear over the engine but could read on their lips. Merci, liberté, vive la France. A woman threw herself against the hull, kissing the steel like it was sacred. A man climbed onto the front glacis, waving a tricolor flag sewn from bed sheets. Get them off, Devereaux barked into the radio. Infantry, clear the civvies. We can't move like this. But there was no infantry close enough. Just us. Just the tank. Just the crowd pressing in like they thought we were saints instead of killers in a metal box. I felt it then. That old, familiar cold. The freeze. The paralysis that came from knowing one wrong move could crush someone, could turn liberation into massacre. My hands locked on the shell casing. My breath caught. Driver, hold position, Devereaux said. Don't. The sound came first. A ripping crack, sharp and high-pitched. MG-42, German machine gun, unmistakable. The sound that had killed more men than I could count, that chopped through air like a saw through bone. Tracer rounds screamed across the boulevard, red streaks in the dying light. The crowd scattered, screaming, falling, running. A woman dropped her flowers and threw herself into a doorway. The man with the flag jumped off the tank and disappeared into an alley. Bodies pressed against walls, into gutters, anywhere that was an open street. "Contact front," Bertrand shouted. 50 meters, second floor window, I snapped back. Training took over. Hands moved. Shell already loaded. Breach closed. Gunner, target building, second floor, center window. Devereaux's voice cut through the chaos. HE, fire when ready. Identified, Bertrand said. The gun swung. Turret traverse whining, crosshairs centering. On target. Fire. The cannon roared. The world went white for a second. Then the building did. The shell punched through brick and exploded inside, and the window vomited smoke and debris. The machine gun stopped. But the silence didn't last. Another burst. Different direction. Left side, then right. Crossfire. They'd been waiting for us. Of course they had. This wasn't liberation. This was an ambush dressed up as a parade route. Multiple contacts, Devereaux yelled. Gunner, traverse left. Infantry, button up. But there was no infantry. Just us. A shell hit somewhere close. Not us. Behind us. The concussion wave rocked Romilly sideways. I slammed into Bertrand. He cursed. My elbow smashed the breach mechanism. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't care because pain meant alive. Status, Devereaux demanded. Tank 2 is hit. The radio screamed static in voices. Panzer Faust, Tank 2 is burning. Through the slit, I saw it. The Sherman behind us, Marseille, I think, I couldn't remember, wreathed in flames. The hull split open like a gutted fish. Black smoke pouring out. No one climbed out. No one was going to. Reverse, Devereaux shouted. Driver, reverse now. Maurice threw the gears. The tank lurched backward. Tracks grinding, engines screaming. We backed into an intersection, and something exploded to our right. The blast turned the air orange. Shrapnel pinged off the turret like hail. A civilian, a boy, couldn't have been more than 15, stumbled out of an alley, clutching his side, blood between his fingers. He looked at me through the slit. Just looked. Then he fell. I wanted to open the hatch, wanted to pull him inside, wanted to do something other than watch him bleed out on cobblestone still warm from summer sun. But I didn't move, because 4 years ago in Africa, I moved when I should have stayed. And someone died because of it. Load, Bertrand yelled. I loaded. Target, building on the right. Ground floor, Panzer Faust team. I saw them through the smoke. 2 Germans, Feldgrau uniforms. One kneeling with the launcher, one feeding the rocket. They moved with the same mechanical precision we did. Just soldiers. Just doing their jobs. Just trying not to die. Bertrand fired. The building's corner disintegrated. The Germans disappeared into dust and rubble and whatever comes after. Direct hit, he said, voice flat, emotionless, the voice we all used when we killed people and didn't want to think about it. The tank shuddered, stopped. Maurice was screaming something I couldn't understand. The engine revved, but we weren't moving. Stuck. Track caught on debris or a curb or a body. I didn't know. Didn't matter. We're stuck, Maurice yelled. I can't, and we're stuck. Through the vision slit, I saw movement in the alley to our right. Shadows, men. Germans moving through smoke like sharks through blood-dark water. And then the world went white again. But this time, we were the ones getting hit. Metal screamed. The hull rang like a bell. My head snapped sideways. Everything went silent except for a high-pitched whine that filled my skull like someone screaming directly into my brain. I tasted copper, blood, mine or someone else's. Couldn't tell. Bertrand was shouting, or maybe I was. The turret was full of smoke, couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Devereaux's voice cut through. Traverse jammed. Gunner, traverse is jammed. We're blind on the right. The radio erupted. Romilly, what's your status? Romilly, respond. But before Devereaux could answer, I saw him through the smoke. A German rifleman, 30 meters away, walking toward our tank, rifle raised, aimed at the commander's hatch. Time fractured. The rifleman moved through smoke like he had all the time in the world. 30 meters, then 25. His rifle, Car 98A. I'd seen enough of them to recognize the profile. Tracked Devereaux's hatch with the patience of a hunter who knew his prey was cornered. Commander down, I screamed. Rifle, front right. Devereaux dropped into the turret basket. The hatch slammed shut. A bullet sparked off the rim where his head had been a second before. The ping echoed inside the tank like a church bell made of hatred. Cokes! Bertrand yelled. I need the cokes! The coaxial machine gun, mounted beside the main gun. But the traverse was jammed. The turret wouldn't swing. We were a 75-ton coffin with a jammed lid, and a German walking toward us with all the time in the world. Driver, rock us, Devereaux ordered. Forward, reverse, forward, break us loose. Maurice slammed the gears. The engine roared. The tank lurched forward 6 inches, stopped, lurched backward, stopped. The tracks screamed against whatever they were caught on. Metal on stone, metal on metal. The sound of a machine eating itself. The rifleman kept walking. I could see his face now through the vision slit. Young, younger than me. Couldn't have been 20. Dirt streaked across his cheeks. Eyes hollow like he'd already died, but his body hadn't figured it out yet. He wasn't shooting anymore, just walking. Like he knew we couldn't hurt him. Like he'd decided this was how it ended and nothing we did would change it. Somebody do something. I didn't realize I was screaming until my throat burned. Bertrand hammered the traverse control. Nothing. He kicked it. Still nothing. It's seized. The hydraulics are... He didn't finish. Just swore in 3 languages and started manually cranking the turret. Too slow. Everything was too slow. Through the smoke, I saw more movement. Not just the riflemen. Others. Shapes materializing from doorways and blown-out storefronts. Germans. A squad at least. Maybe more. Advancing undercover while we sat paralyzed in the middle of the intersection like an exhibition piece in a museum of failures. Then I heard them. Voices. French voices, shouting from somewhere above. Boche! Boche à droite! Germans on the right. The resistance. Trying to warn us. Trying to help. But what could they do? They had rifles and courage and nothing else. We were the ones with the tank. We were supposed to be the cavalry. We were supposed to save them. The tank lurched forward again. Caught. Stopped. It's the track, Maurice screamed. The right track is fouled. There's debris in the... A bottle arced through the air. Glass, cloth wick, burning, Molotov cocktail. It hit the rear deck, shattered. Fire spread across the engine, grating like liquid hatred. The temperature inside the tank spiked instantly. Sweat poured down my face. The air tasted like gasoline and burning paint, and the specific kind of terror that comes from being cooked alive in a metal box. Fire on the engine deck. Devereaux yelled into the radio. We need support. Now. Static. Screaming. Another voice. Negative, Romilly. Entire column is engaged. You're on your own. On our own. The story of the war, really. Always on your own when it mattered. Bertrand gave up on the traverse, grabbed his sidearm. A MAB Model D 7 rounds. Might as well have been a slingshot for all the good it would do against a squad of infantry. But he checked it anyway. Habit. Training. The motions we went through when giving up wasn't an option, but neither was winning. I'm going out, he said. The hell you are, Devereaux snapped. The Cokes won't traverse. The main gun is useless. They're going to grenade us or burn us out. You'll die in 3 seconds. Then I'll make them count. I looked at Bertrand. Really looked. His hands weren't shaking. Mine were. His eyes were clear. Mine felt like they were bleeding. He'd made his peace with this. With dying in a Paris street so close to liberation, he could probably smell the freedom he'd never taste. Wait, I said. Everyone looked at me. The boy, I said. The resistance fighter. He pointed something out before he fell. The alley. Right side. He was trying to show us something. What? Devereaux demanded. I don't know. But he was pointing. An explosion cut me off. Not us. Close, maybe 10 meters. The building across the street erupted in smoke and brick dust. Someone had thrown a grenade. Germans or resistance, I couldn't tell. Didn't matter. The blast wave shook loose whatever was fouling our track. The tank lurched forward. We're free, Maurice shouted. I've got control. Then move, Devereaux ordered. Get us to cover. That alley the kid pointed at. Go. The Sherman roared. Tracks bit cobblestones. We accelerated with all the grace of a drunk elephant, weaving past burning wreckage and abandoned barricades. The rifleman fired. The round sparked off our glacis plate. Then we were past him, around him, leaving him in our dust and our exhaust. Maurice swung us hard right into the alley the boy had pointed toward. And we found out why. The alley opened into a small courtyard, walled on 3 sides. One entrance, the one we'd just come through. And waiting there, hidden behind an overturned cart and a pile of sandbags, were resistance fighters. 6 of them, maybe 7. Hard to tell through the smoke. Men and women both. Armed with a mix of rifles, 1 Sten gun, and what looked like a German MP-40 someone had liberated the hard way. They stared at us like we were a hallucination, like tanks didn't just appear in courtyards during firefights. A man stepped forward. Older, 50 maybe. Wore a beret and a jacket that had seen better decades. He had the bearing of someone who'd been a soldier once and remembered how. He raised his hand. Devereaux popped the hatch. Just his head. Just enough to talk. You speak French? The man called. I am French, Devereaux replied. The man's face cracked into something that might have been a smile, if smiles existed in war. Then welcome home, Lieutenant. You're late. Traffic was terrible. Despite everything, the fire, the fear, the boy bleeding out 50 meters behind us, I almost laughed. Almost. We've been holding this sector for 3 days, the man continued. Germans have a strong point in the École Militaire. 2 armored cars, maybe 30 infantry. They've been bleeding us dry. We're supposed to reach Hôtel de Ville, Devereaux said. You'll never make it up Boulevard Saint-Michel, not without clearing that strong point first. They've got overlapping fields of fire on every approach. Then we clear it. The man looked at our tank, at the fire still burning on the engine deck, at the jammed turret that Bertrand was now hammering with a wrench in a desperate attempt to free, at us. With one tank? You have a better suggestion? The man considered this. Then he turned and shouted to his fighters, "Bring the Panzerfaust!" A woman emerged from behind the sandbags. Young, 20 at most. She carried a Panzerfaust like it was a sacred relic, which, in a way, it was. German anti-tank weapon, probably taken off a dead soldier. One shot, no reloads. But one shot was all you needed if you aimed true. "We hit them at dusk," the man said. "You draw their fire. We flank from the gardens. The armored cars won't be able to traverse fast enough to track both threats." "That's not a plan," Devereaux said. "That's suicide with extra steps." "You have a better one?" Devereaux didn't answer. Because he didn't. Because we were in Paris with one half-functional tank, a resistance cell running on courage and desperation, and a mission that required us to punch through a fortified position or die trying. The radio crackled. "All units, be advised. German column confirmed moving toward Notre Dame. Panzer I-4s. Repeat, German armor moving to reinforce Paris defenders." Devereaux looked at me, then at Bertrand, then at Maurice. "If we don't clear that strong point," he said quietly, "the entire push stalls. The column gets pinned, the Germans reinforce, and Paris stays German for another month, another year, maybe forever." "No pressure," Maurice muttered. Bertrand finally got the traverse unstuck. The turret groaned and swung left, then right, testing. Sluggish but functional. He looked up at Devereaux. "I can shoot," he said. That was all. 3 words. But they carried the weight of everything we'd done and everything we were about to do. I can shoot, I can kill, I can do my job even if my job is feeding shells into a cannon and pretending that's different from murder. The resistance leader was watching us, waiting. The woman with the Panzerfaust checked the sight. The other fighters loaded magazines and fixed bayonets and did all the small rituals that soldiers do before they walk into fire. I thought about the boy again. The one who'd pointed toward this alley before he died. The one who'd given us a chance we didn't deserve and couldn't repay. He was maybe 15. Probably never fired a gun before the occupation. Probably dreamed about cafes and girls and a future that looked nothing like bleeding out on cobblestones while strangers in tanks rolled past. And I'd watched him die without doing anything. Just like Africa. Just like always. "Load up," Devereaux ordered. "We move in 5. Check your ammunition. Check your weapons. Check your souls if you've still got them." I loaded a shell. High explosive. Enough to punch through brick and steel and flesh and bone and everything else that stood between us and whatever came next. Through the vision slit, I could see the sky. Still orange, still burning. But darker now. Dusk coming. The city holding its breath. Somewhere, those bells rang again. And I realized there was no safe direction left in Paris. Only forward. Only through. Only the last shot no one wants to fire, but someone has to. The resistance leader climbed onto our hull, knocked on the turret. His face appeared above Devereaux's hatch. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" he asked. "Devereaux. Yours?" "Bernard. And that doesn't matter. What matters is this." He pointed toward the École Militaire. "That strong point killed 17 of my people yesterday. Good people. People who'd never held a gun before the Germans came. People who died trying to take back their own city." He looked at each of us in turn. "So, when you shoot," he said quietly, "make it count. Make it mean something. Because they're not just watching anymore." He gestured to the windows above. And I saw them. Faces, dozens of them, pressed against glass, hiding behind shutters, old men, women, children, the people of Paris, watching us, waiting to see if we were the liberation they'd been promised or just another army rolling through their streets. "They're counting on you," Bernard said. Then he dropped off the tank and disappeared into the shadows with his fighters. Devereaux sealed the hatch. The radio hissed, "All units, advance at 2015 hours. Resistance will mark targets with white smoke." 20 minutes. I checked my watch. The hands seemed to be moving backward. Bertrand traversed the gun, left to right, testing. The hydraulics whined but held. Maurice revved the engine. The fire on the rear deck had burned itself out, leaving scorch marks like war paint. And I sat in my position, hands on the next shell, and tried not to think about the boy. Tried not to think about Africa. Tried not to think about all the ways hesitation kills the people you're supposed to save. "You ready for this?" Bertrand asked me. I wasn't. But I said, "No." "Good," he replied. "Means you're still human." 20 minutes became 15, became 10. Time moved differently before combat, simultaneously racing and crawling. Each second felt like an hour and also like it was already gone before you could grasp it. I counted breaths, counted shells, counted all the ways this could go wrong and ran out of fingers. The courtyard had gone quiet. The resistance fighters melted into shadows, moving through Paris like they'd been born in its alleys. Maybe they had been. Maybe that's what gave them the courage to fight with stolen weapons and improvised tactics against an army that had conquered half of Europe. Bernard reappeared at Devereaux's hatch one last time. "The armored cars are SDKFZ 222s, he said. "Light armor, 20mm autocannon. They usually park in a V formation covering the main approach. Infantry behind sandbags on the steps. MG-42 in the second floor window, right side." "Munitions?" Devereaux asked. "They resupplied 2 days ago, so assume full load." "Wonderful." Bernard almost smiled. "One more thing. There's a cellar, north side of the building. 40 civilians sheltering there. Women, children, old men who couldn't run fast enough." The words hung in the air like smoke. Devereaux nodded slowly. "We'll keep the HE focused on the vehicles and the MG nest. Nothing structural." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Bernard dropped away. This time he didn't come back. Inside the tank we ran through the checklist, the ritual, the mechanical prayers that were supposed to keep us alive. "Main gun?" Devereaux called. "Loaded, HE, 23 rounds remaining." Bertrand replied. "Cokes?" "Functional, 250 rounds in the belt." "Driver?" "Engine at 80%. Right track is chewed but holding. We've got maybe 2 kilometers before she throws," Maurice said. "Good enough. Loader?" I looked at the shells racked along the turret basket. Counted them again, even though I already knew. 23 HE, 8 AP, 4 smoke. Save the AP for armor. Everything else goes into infantry positions. Understood? Understood. But my hands were shaking now. Not much. Just enough that I noticed. Just enough that I knew the freeze was coming. The paralysis. The moment when my brain would remember Africa and decide that staying still was safer than moving forward. I'd lost someone because I froze. I couldn't lose anyone else. 2 minutes, Devereaux said. The radio crackled. "All units, white smoke marking targets in 60 seconds. Advance on smoke. Resistance will suppress from the flanks. Good hunting." Good hunting. Like we were after deer instead of men. Like this was sport instead of slaughter. Maurice revved the engine. The Sherman shuddered like a dog shaking off water. Metal groaned, gears meshed, the mechanical symphony of war preparing to play its oldest song. "You think they'll remember us?" I asked. Didn't mean to say it out loud. But the words came anyway, pulled out by fear and exhaustion and the desperate need to believe this meant something. "Who?" Bertrand asked. "The people, the civilians. After this, you think they'll remember we were the ones who came back? That we were French, not just another army?" Bertrand adjusted his periscope, checked the gun elevation. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, tired, old beyond his 26 years. "If we live long enough for anyone to remember anything," he said, "I'll consider it a miracle." The radio hissed, 30 seconds. Through the vision slit, I could see smoke beginning to curl from the direction of the École Militaire. Not artillery smoke, signal smoke. White and thin, rising like a ghost, pointing the way to hell. "That's our mark," Devereaux said. "Driver, advance. Combat speed. Gunner, acquire targets as they appear. Loader?" He paused. I could feel him looking at me even though I couldn't see his face. "Don't freeze on me," he said quietly. "Not today. Not here." He knew. Of course he knew. You didn't serve in the same tank crew for 8 months without learning each other's demons, without knowing which ones to name and which ones to leave sleeping. "I won't," I said. I hoped it was true. "Advancing," Maurice announced. The tank rolled forward, out of the courtyard, back into the street. The tracks clattered over cobblestones that had seen emperors and revolutionaries, and now us. Just soldiers trying to finish something someone else started 4 years ago. The smoke grew thicker, white streamers marking the killing ground. Through it, I could see shapes. The École Militaire's outline, gray stone turned golden by the dying light. The armored cars Bernard had mentioned. Yes, there. 2 of them in a V formation, exactly as described. Sandbags, silhouettes behind them. And somewhere in that building, 40 people hiding in a cellar, praying that the shells knew the difference between enemies and innocents. "Target acquired," Bertrand said. "Left armored car. Range 200 meters. Fire when ready. Identified." The word hung for a moment. Then, "On target. Fire." The cannon roared. The world went white, then orange. Then the armored car wasn't there anymore, just a fireball expanding outward, consuming metal and fuel and whoever had been inside. The explosion echoed off the buildings, came back to us doubled and tripled, Paris itself screaming. Before the smoke cleared, the Germans fired back. The MG-42 opened up. That sound, like canvas tearing, like reality itself ripping at the seams, filled the street. Tracers arced toward us, bounced off armor, sparked into the dusk like angry fireflies. One round found the vision slit, didn't penetrate, just starred the glass and turned my view into a spiderweb of cracks. "Can't see," I yelled. "Use the periscope. Load." I grabbed the next shell, hands moving, training taking over. The freeze pushed back by adrenaline and muscle memory and the simple fact that stopping meant dying. I slammed the shell home, closed the breech. Up. Target. Right armored car. Fire. The gun roared again. This time the shot went low. Struck the sandbags instead of the vehicle. Dirt and fabric exploded. A body tumbled backward, silhouetted for just a moment before disappearing into the chaos. "Missed," Bertrand cursed. "Traverse left. Reload." The second armored car was moving now, backing up, trying to find cover. Its autocannon swiveled toward us, 20mm rounds. Couldn't penetrate our frontal armor, but could tear through vision slits and hatches and anything soft. "He's got us!" Maurice shouted. The autocannon fired. A string of impacts walked across our glacis plate. 1, 2, 3, like someone knocking to come in. Then the fourth hit the turret ring. Metal shrieked. Something snapped inside the traverse mechanism. "Traverse is gone again," Bertrand yelled. We were locked, frozen in place, gun pointing 30 degrees left of where we needed it. "Driver, pivot the hull. Give the gunner angle." Maurice tried. The left track locked. The right track drove forward. The tank slewed sideways like a drunk dancer. Slow, too slow. The armored car was already firing again. And then I heard it. A sharp crack. Different from the autocannon. Louder, closer. The Panzerfaust. The woman from the resistance had fired. The rocket streaked across the courtyard, a line of fire and smoke and desperate hope. It hit the second armored car, dead center. The vehicle lifted off its wheels. Just lifted like God had grabbed it and decided it didn't belong on Earth anymore. Then it came back down in pieces. Burning pieces. Pieces that had been men a second ago. "Target destroyed!" Someone screamed over the radio. Might have been me, might have been Devereaux, might have been God himself announcing judgment. But we weren't done. The infantry behind the sandbags opened fire. Rifles. An MG-34. Grenades arcing through the smoke. One hit our front left track, exploded. The tank shuddered but kept moving. Another grenade bounced off the turret, fell, detonated next to us. Shrapnel pinged like hail. "Infantry in the open," Bertrand called. "I need the cokes." I didn't think, just moved, reached past him, grabbed the coaxial machine gun trigger. The Browning .30 caliber roared to life. Tracers cut through smoke, found targets. Bodies fell or scattered or crawled or screamed. I couldn't tell which. Didn't want to know. My hands shook on the trigger, but they didn't freeze. Not this time. Not here. "Cease fire," Devereaux ordered. "Coke, cease fire." I released the trigger. The barrel glowed orange in the dimness. Smoke poured from the port. My ears rang so loud I could barely hear. "White flags," Devereaux was saying. "I see white flags. They're surrendering." I looked through the cracked vision slit. Saw them. 3 Germans emerging from behind the sandbags. Hands raised, rifles on the ground. Young faces. Terrified faces. Faces that looked like mine probably looked. The resistance fighters appeared from the flanks. Rifles trained on the surrendering soldiers. Bernard among them. He was shouting orders, pointing, organizing, turning chaos back into something resembling control. The MG-42 in the second-floor window had gone silent. The courtyard was ours. The strong point was broken, and 40 civilians in a cellar would live to see tomorrow. Devereaux popped the hatch, stood up, surveyed the wreckage. When he spoke, his voice carried something I hadn't heard in months. Not quite joy, not quite relief. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job done and a promise kept. "Romilly, this is Lieutenant Devereaux. Strong point neutralized. Resistance has the position. Casualties." He paused, looked around. "Unknown. Requesting medical support and link up with main column." The radio crackled back. "Acknowledged, Romilly. Well done. Proceed to Hotel de Ville. Resistance is waiting." Well done. 2 words that somehow made everything worse instead of better. Because they meant we'd done exactly what we were supposed to do. Killed exactly who we were supposed to kill. And the people hiding in that cellar would never know how close they came to being rubble instead of survivors. I looked at my hands. They'd stopped shaking, but they didn't feel like mine anymore. The smoke cleared slowly, like the city was reluctant to show us what we'd done. Bodies. Not many. 5, maybe 6. Hard to count when they weren't whole anymore. German field gray mixed with Parisian cobblestones. Blood running into cracks between stones, pooling in places that had probably seen wine spills and rain and children's chalk drawings before the war taught them to hold darker things. The surrendered Germans sat against a wall under guard. 3 of them. Boys, really. Couldn't have been older than 19. One was crying, not sobbing. Just silent tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. Another stared at nothing with eyes that had already evacuated his skull. The third kept looking at his hands, like he'd forgotten what they were for. Bernard approached the tank, climbed onto the hull. His face was harder now than it had been 20 minutes ago. Older. Like the fighting had aged him a decade in the time it took to fire a Panzerfaust and watch men die. "You kept your word," he said to Devereaux. "The cellar is intact. No one inside was hurt." "How many did you lose?" Devereaux asked. Bernard's jaw tightened. 2. Marie, the one with the Panzerfaust, she didn't get clear fast enough after she fired. The backblast gave away her position. He paused. And old Claude. Took a rifle round through the throat, dead before he hit the ground. I thought about the woman, about how she'd carried that Panzerfaust like it was sacred, about how she'd fired it and saved us and died because of it, about how I didn't even know her name until now. Marie, a name I'd remember and a face I'd never forget, and a debt I could never repay. "I'm sorry," I said. Didn't mean to speak, but the words came anyway. Bernard looked at me. Really looked, not at the tank, not at the uniform, at me, at whatever he saw in my face that made him nod slowly. "Don't be sorry," he said. "Be worth it." That's all any of them wanted. To matter, to mean something, to be more than just names the Germans write down and forget. He dropped off the tank. "We'll hold here until your column arrives," he called back. "But move fast. The Germans know this position fell. They'll reinforce or counterattack within the hour." Then he was gone, disappearing into the smoke and shadows with his remaining fighters and the ghosts of the ones who weren't coming back. "Mount up," Devereaux ordered. "We've still got a job to finish." Maurice started the engine. The Sherman coughed, caught, roared. Black smoke poured from the exhaust. The right track was grinding now, metal on metal, a sound that meant we were running on borrowed time. "How long do we have?" Devereaux asked. "Maybe a kilometer," Maurice replied. "Maybe less. That track is chewed to hell. When it goes, we're done. Then we make that kilometer count." The radio crackled. "All units. German armor confirmed moving toward Ile de la Cité. 2 Panzerfees. Unknown infantry support. All available units converge on Place de l'Hôtel de Ville. Repeat, converge on Hôtel de Ville. Resistance is requesting immediate support." "That's us," Devereaux said. "Driver, best speed to Hôtel de Ville. Take Boulevard Saint-Michel." "That's the main avenue," I said. "It'll be exposed, wide open. It's also the fastest route, and we don't have time for careful." The tank rolled forward, out of the courtyard, past the burning wrecks of the armored cars, past the bodies, past the prisoners who watched us leave with expressions somewhere between relief and despair. Back into Paris. The boulevard opened before us like a canyon. 4 lanes wide, buildings rising on either side like cliffs, windows everywhere, balconies, rooftops, 1,000 places for someone to hide with a Panzerfaust or a rifle or just hatred in a brick. And people, civilians everywhere. More than before, hundreds of them, lining the streets, pressed against buildings, hanging from windows. They'd heard the fighting, heard that we'd won, heard that liberation was real and not just a rumor whispered in cellars and passed hand to hand like contraband hope. They were celebrating, bottles of wine appearing from nowhere, tricolor flags sewn from bed sheets and tablecloths and wedding dresses. An old woman threw flowers at the tank. They bounced off the turret, leaving pollen and petals like the world's gentlest shrapnel. "My God," Bertrand whispered. "Look at them." I looked. Through the cracked vision slit, through the smoke and dust and gathering dusk, I looked at Paris, remembering how to smile, how to cry, how to be something other than afraid. And I felt nothing. Not joy, not pride, not the satisfaction of a job well done, just the cold certainty that we were about to ruin it. "Driver, slow down," I said. "What?" Maurice asked. "Slow down. We can't. There are too many people. If we have to engage, if there's contact, they'll—" "We have orders," Devereaux cut in. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. He saw it too. Saw the same equation I did. Tank plus civilians plus enemy fire equals massacre. "We should wait," I said. "Wait for the street to clear. Wait for—" "We don't have time to wait." "Then we make time. We can't—" "Loader." Devereaux's voice dropped. Quiet, hard, the voice he used when an order wasn't up for discussion. "We have a mission. The resistance is pinned at Hotel de Ville. German armor is moving to crush them. If we don't get there, they die. All of them, you understand?" I understood. I just didn't know if understanding made it right. The tank kept rolling. The crowd pressed closer. A man climbed onto the front glasses, started pounding on the hull, shouting. I couldn't hear the words over the engine, but I could read his face. Joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. The kind that doesn't know yet what it cost, what it's going to cost, what it always costs when tanks and happiness try to occupy the same street. "Get him off," Devereaux ordered. "How?" Maurice asked. "I don't know, just—" The radio screamed, "Contact! Contact at Hotel de Ville. Panzer IVs engaging resistance positions. We need armor support now." And then I heard it. The sound I'd learned to fear more than anything else in this war. The low grinding rumble of tank tracks on stone. Not ours. Theirs. Coming from ahead. From the direction of Ile de la Cité. From exactly where we were supposed to be going. "All units, this is Lieutenant Devereaux. We are 1 minute out from Hotel de Ville. Clear the—" He stopped, because through the smoke and the dusk and the crowds that didn't know enough to run, we saw it. The Panzer IV, sitting at the intersection, turret slowly traversing, looking for targets, looking for us. And between us and it, maybe 300 civilians, still celebrating, still throwing flowers, still believing that the worst was over instead of realizing it was just beginning. "Driver, stop," Devereaux said quietly. "What?" "Stop the tank." Maurice stopped. The engine idled. The Panzer sat at the intersection, its 75mm gun still searching. It hadn't seen us yet. Too much smoke. Too many civilians blocking line of sight. Too much chaos. But it would. Any second now, it would. And when it did, when it fired, when the shell came screaming down this boulevard, it wouldn't care about flags or flowers or the fact that these people had waited 4 years to be free. It would just kill them. All of them. Unless we fired first. Unless we put a shell through that intersection before the Panzer found us. Unless we did our job and accepted that doing our job meant turning liberation into a charnel house. "Gunner," Devereaux said. His voice sounded far away, hollow, like he was already somewhere else, somewhere he wouldn't have to live with what came next. "Acquire target. Panzer IV, front." I can't, Bertrand said. I can't get a clean shot. The people are. I know. If I fire, I know. Commander, there has to be another. There isn't. The silence that followed was louder than the cannon, louder than the MG-42, louder than every explosion and scream and death rattle I'd heard in 4 years of war. It was the silence of a choice that couldn't be unmade. I looked at the shell in my hands. High explosive, designed to punch through armor and detonate inside, turning crews into red mist and metal shards. But in that intersection, with those people, it wouldn't just kill the Panzer crew. It would kill anyone within 20 meters of impact, maybe 30, maybe more. I thought about the boy, the one who'd pointed us towards safety before he died, the one I'd watched bleed out without doing anything. I thought about Africa, about the voice screaming my name, about how I froze and someone burned and I lived with it every single day since. I thought about Marie, about old Claude, about every person who died today so that Paris could be free. And I realized something that made my hands shake worse than fear ever had. Liberation wasn't a gift. It was a bill, and someone always had to pay it. Load, Devereaux said. My hands didn't move. Loader, load the gun. The Panzer's turret stopped traversing, centered, aimed down the boulevard, at us, at them, at everything that liberation was supposed to mean and everything it actually cost. Load the gun, Bertrand screamed. And somewhere in the distance, those bells were still ringing. But I couldn't hear them anymore. All I could hear was my own voice, small and broken, and asking a question that didn't have an answer. How do I choose? You don't, Devereaux said quietly. You just load the gun. I loaded the gun. My hands moved. Training, muscle memory, the motions we'd practiced 10,000 times until they became automatic, until thinking wasn't part of the equation anymore. Just action, just survival, just the terrible machinery of war grinding forward because stopping wasn't an option even when going forward meant breaking something that couldn't be fixed. The shell slid home, heavy, cold, final. I closed the breech. Up, I said. The word tasted like ash. Identified, Bertrand said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. I could see them shaking on the traverse control. See the sweat running down his neck despite the evening chill. See everything he was trying not to see through that periscope. The civilians were still there, still celebrating, still trapped between us and the Panzer without knowing it. A woman held a child on her shoulders. An old man waved a flag. A couple kissed against a lamppost like the war had already ended and tomorrow would be gentle. The Panzer's gun elevated slightly, adjusting, calculating, any second now. Fire, Devereaux said. Bertrand's finger tightened on the trigger. And then the world stopped making sense. A figure ran into the intersection. From the left, from nowhere. Moving fast, moving desperate. Waving arms, screaming something I couldn't hear but could feel in my chest like a fist around my heart. It was Bernard, the resistance leader, running straight at the Panzer. Alone, unarmed except for what looked like a bottle in his hand. Not wine, gasoline, another Molotov, cloth wick already burning. What is he? Maurice started. Bernard didn't slow down, didn't stop. Just ran straight at 70 tons of German armor like he was bulletproof or already dead or had decided there was no difference anymore. The Panzer's machine gun opened up. Tracers cut the air, found him. He stumbled, fell, got up, kept running. Blood on his jacket now, dark patches spreading. But he didn't stop, couldn't stop, because he knew what we knew. That if that Panzer fired, Everyone died. The civilians, the celebration, the dream of liberation, everything. So he ran, and he threw. The Molotov arced through the air, end over end, burning, a comet of desperation and courage and the kind of mathematics that says one life is worth 300 if you do the addition right. It hit the Panzer's vision slit, shattered. Fire spread across the glacis plate. Not enough to kill, not enough to disable, but enough to blind, enough to panic, enough to make the gunner flinch and the driver reverse and the commander pop the hatch to see what the hell was happening. Bernard collapsed in the street. Didn't get up this time. The civilians saw it happen, saw him fall, saw what he'd done. And something changed in that crowd. The celebration died, replaced by something rawer, something that understood the price. They started running then, finally, scrambling for cover, mothers grabbing children, old men diving into doorways, the intersection clearing like water draining. But not fast enough, never fast enough. Now, Devereaux screamed, while it's backing up, fire now. The Panzer was reversing, trying to get clear of the flames, trying to reacquire targets. But it was moving, exposing its side armor. And the civilians, most of them, were scattering, running, diving into doorways and alleys and anywhere that wasn't between two tanks about to trade shells. Target moving, Bertrand yelled. Traversing right, tracking. The turret swung. The gun followed. Crosshairs chasing the Panzer as it backed into a side street. I could see Bertrand's hands working the controls. Smooth, professional. Like he wasn't about to kill men he'd never met. Men who probably had families. Men who were just doing their job the same way we were doing ours. War made philosophers of us all. And then it made us forget the questions and pull the trigger anyway. Range 120, moving target. Fire when ready. On target. The cannon roared. The recoil rocked to the tank. The shell casing ejected. Hot brass rang against the turret floor. Smoke filled the compartment. The familiar smell of cordite and burned powder and violence. The shell caught the Panzer in the turret ring, right where the armor was thinnest, right where crews prayed nothing would hit. The impact sounded like God slamming a door. The Panzer shuddered, stopped. Smoke poured from every hatch and seam. For a moment, I thought we'd killed it. For a moment, I thought we were done. But it wasn't dead. The turret was still moving, slowly, grinding against damaged gears. The gun was coming around, coming back toward us. And even wounded, even burning, a Panzer IV could kill a Sherman at this range without breaking a sweat. German engineering, German determination, German refusal to die when dying would have been kinder. Reload, Bertrand screamed. Reload, reload, reload. I grabbed the next shell, hands moving, not thinking, not feeling, just motion, just the job. Just the mechanical dance of feeding the beast that kept us alive. The shell was heavier than before, or my arms were weaker, or the weight of what we were doing had finally found physical form. The Panzer's gun was almost pointed at us now, almost level, almost ready. Faster, Devereaux yelled. I shoved the shell home, closed the breech, slapped the ready indicator. Up! But I was too slow. The Panzer fired. The world went white, then orange. Then I was on the floor of the turret basket, and Bertrand was screaming, and the tank was full of smoke. And the ringing in my ears was so loud, I thought my skull had cracked open. Everything hurt. Everything. My back where I'd hit the floor, my head where it had bounced off something metal. My hands still gripping the shell casing like it was the only real thing left in the universe. Status, someone yelling. Devereaux. Had to be Devereaux. Loader, status, I tried to answer. Couldn't hear my own voice. Couldn't hear anything except that ringing and underneath it, a sound like metal tearing and somewhere further away, screaming. Human screaming. The kind that meant someone was dying and knew it. The shell had hit us. We were still alive. That meant it hadn't penetrated. That meant we had seconds before it fired again. That meant we'd gotten lucky in a way that felt like drowning in air. I found the shell, still in my hand somehow. Miracle or muscle memory or both. My fingers were white where they gripped the casing, knuckles standing out like bone through skin. I shoved it into the breech, slammed it closed with force born of fear and adrenaline and the absolute certainty that hesitation meant death. "Up!" I screamed. Or thought I screamed. Couldn't tell. My voice sounded far away, like someone else was using it, like I was watching myself from outside my own body. Through the smoke I saw Bertrand, blood running from his nose, eyes unfocused, a cut above his eyebrow leaking red down his face. But his hands were on the controls, still aiming, still tracking, still doing the job even though the job had just tried to kill us and would probably try again in about 3 seconds. "Target acquired." His voice distant, underwater, like he was drowning too. 100 meters, stationary." The Panzer had stopped backing up, committed, going to make it stand here. One more shot. Winner lives, loser burns. The simplest equation war ever invented. The mathematics of tank warfare. Addition and subtraction with explosives. "Fire," Devereaux ordered. Bertrand fired. The cannon roared again. The muzzle flash lit the smoke-filled interior like lightning in a thunderhead. The sound was physical. A hammer to the chest. A fist to the gut. The kind of noise that reminded you that physics didn't care about your hearing or your sanity or your soul. The shell flew true, caught the Panzer in the turret, dead center. This time something broke, something vital. The explosion came from inside, not outside. Pressure finding the weakest seam, finding the ammunition, finding the crew. The turret lifted, just lifted. Separated from the hull like it had been welded on by someone who didn't care about permanence. Hung in the air for a moment like it was thinking about coming back down. Like gravity had to consult with physics before making a decision. Then it fell. Sideways. Into the street. 20 tons of steel and dead men hitting cobblestones with the sound of everything breaking at once. The Panzer IV was dead. But we weren't done. Because from the side streets, from the buildings, from everywhere and nowhere, they came. German infantry. A dozen at first, then more. Feldgrau uniforms pouring from cover like water from a broken dam. They'd been waiting. Waiting for the tank duel to finish, waiting to see who won. And now they knew. And now they were going to make us pay for it. "Infantry," Maurice was screaming. "Infantry all sides. We're surrounded." Rifle fire cracked against the hull. Sharp reports like someone snapping steel cables. A Panzerfaust team appeared in a second-floor window. 2 men, one holding the launcher, one feeding the rocket. They moved with practiced efficiency, with the kind of coordination that came from training and terror working together. The woman raised the launcher. Aimed. Right at us. Right at the turret where we sat in our metal coffin pretending armor made us immortal. "Coke's left," Devereaux ordered. I grabbed the machine gun, swung it. The Browning .30 caliber was hot, always hot, the barrel practically glowing from sustained fire. I lined up on the window. Didn't aim so much as point and pray. Pressed the trigger. The gun roared. Tracers walked across the building, found the window. The woman disappeared. The Panzerfaust clattered into the street, unfired. One threat down, 50 more appearing, more rifle fire, closer now. A grenade bounced off the turret, fell. I watched it fall like I was watching a movie, like it wasn't real, like grenades were something that happened to other people in other tanks, in other wars. It exploded. The tank rocked. Something pinged off the vision slit. Another crack in the glass, another spider web of fractured reality. Soon, it would be opaque. Soon we'd be blind. Soon we'd be dead. "We need to move," Maurice yelled. "If we stay here, they'll..." A Panzer Faust streaked across the intersection. Orange trail, smoke. The sound of compressed hell moving at 300 feet per second. Missed us by meters. Hit a building instead. The facade collapsed. Brick and mortar and whatever had been behind it, furniture, pictures, lives, tumbling into the street in a cloud of dust and screaming. Civilians screaming. They hadn't all gotten clear. Some were still there, still trapped, caught between the fighting and the buildings and the terrible reality that liberation looked a lot like war. Looked exactly like war. Was war. Would always be war, no matter what words we used to make it sound noble. A family huddled in a doorway. Father covering mother, covering children. All of them pressed against stone like it could save them. Like anything could save them when the world was exploding. "Driver, forward," Devereaux ordered. "Push through to Hotel de Ville. Don't stop for anything. The people will die if we stay here. Move." Maurice moved. The tank surged forward, into the intersection, into the smoke and the fire and the chaos that had become Place de l'Hôtel de Ville without anyone noticing when the celebration turned into a battlefield. The tracks ground over cobblestones, over debris, over things I didn't want to identify. I saw it through the vision slit, saw everything, every horrible piece of it. Resistance fighters behind a barricade made of cafe tables and park benches and corpses. Firing, reloading, firing again, holding a perimeter that kept shrinking. A man fell. Another took his place. That one fell too. They kept fighting anyway because stopping meant dying, and dying meant the Germans won and the Germans couldn't win. Not here, not now, not after 4 years. German infantry advancing, house to house, window to window. The way they'd been trained, the way they'd conquered half of Europe. Methodical, professional, deadly, fire and movement, covering each other, using smoke, using shadows, using everything they'd learned from conquering France and Belgium and Poland and everywhere else their boots had touched. And between them, civilians, running, hiding, dying. An old man fell, clutching his chest. Heart attack or bullet didn't matter. Dead was dead. A woman dragged 2 children into a doorway, screaming at them to stay down, stay quiet, stay alive. A boy, couldn't have been 12, threw a rock at a German soldier. The soldier turned, raised his rifle. The boy stood there, defiant, stupid, brave, all of the above. The soldier shot him. The boy dropped like someone cut his strings. And I kept loading shells, kept firing, kept doing the job even though the job had become something monstrous. Something that would follow me home if home still existed after this. Something that would sit beside me at dinner and sleep beside me at night and whisper in my ear every time I tried to forget. "Target, balcony right, MG nest." Load, fire. The balcony disintegrated. The machine gun fell silent. The men operating it fell with it. 3 stories. They didn't scream, just fell, like dolls tossed by an angry child. "Target, ground floor, Panzerfaust team." Load, fire. The building's corner exploded. Stone and wood and men becoming debris and becoming history, becoming statistics in a report someone would file and no one would read. "Target, second floor, Stop, I screamed. We're hitting. We can't. There are still. A shell hit us from behind. Different sound, different angle, deeper, harder. The kind of impact that meant armor piercing, meant tank cannon, meant another Panzer, the second one. The one we'd forgotten about because we were too busy killing the first one and everything else in front of us. The impact threw me forward. My face hit the breach mechanism. Pain exploded across my cheekbone, blood in my mouth. Tasted like copper and failure. Couldn't tell if it was mine or someone else's, or if it mattered anymore when we were all bleeding in the same metal box. Panzer rear. Someone screaming, everyone screaming. The words overlapping until they became just noise, just terror given voice. We're flanked. Reverse, reverse. Maurice threw the gears. The tank lurched backward. Too slow. Too late. The second Panzer had position, had angle, had everything. We were dead. I knew it with the certainty of mathematics and Murphy's Law and 4 years of watching better men die for smaller mistakes. We were dead. The Panzer's gun was traversing, finding us. The barrels swinging around like the finger of God, pointing at who died next. And it was pointing at us, at me. At all of us in our metal coffin that suddenly felt very small and very thin and very temporary. I thought about Africa, about the voice screaming my name, about how I was finally going to pay for running instead of staying, about how the bill always comes due eventually and interest is a bitch. And then the sky opened up, not with rain, with fire, artillery, American. Had to be American from the sound of it. 105mm howitzers. Somewhere north of the city, the entire column's worth. Some forward observer finally getting through. Finally calling in the coordinates. Finally bringing the thunder. Raining shells down on German positions with the kind of concentrated violence that makes everything else feel like a fist fight. The building behind the 2nd Panzer exploded. Then the building beside it, then the street itself, cobblestones lifting and scattering like confetti made of stone and century-old mortar. The air filled with dust and smoke and the specific smell of high explosives making their argument. The Panzer tried to move, started to reverse, got caught in the barrage. A shell landed directly on top of it, not beside it, not near it, on top of it. The turret crumpled like paper, like tin foil, like it had been made of wishes instead of steel. The hull split. Fire poured out, black smoke and orange flame, and the end of 6 men I would never meet and never mourn and never forget. And just like that, it was over. The German infantry that had been advancing were retreating. The Panzerfaust teams were running. The methodical, professional, deadly advance had become a rout. Men dropping weapons, raising hands, running, just running. Because courage has limits, and those limits are usually spelled out in high explosives and overwhelming force. The radio crackled through the static and the ringing and the sound of my own breathing like I'd just run a marathon underwater. All units, Place de l'Hôtel de Ville is secure. Repeat, Hôtel de Ville is secure. German forces are withdrawing. Paris is static. Then, Paris is ours. The words hung in the air. Paris is ours. 3 words that should have meant everything. 3 words that meant nothing because I was staring through the cracked vision slit at what it cost. Silence. Not real silence. The kind that comes after artillery. When your ears are so ruined by concussion that the world sounds like it's wrapped in cotton. Like you're underwater. Like reality has been turned down to a whisper. But compared to what came before, it was silence. Everybody out, Devereaux said. His voice was flat, empty, the voice of a man who'd spent everything he had and was running on fumes and willpower. We're done. Tank's done. Tracks thrown. We're not going anywhere. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not the small tremor from before. Full shaking. Like I was freezing. Like I'd never be warm again. Blood on my fingers. Mine. Bertrand's. Someone's. Didn't matter. It all looked the same in the smoke and the dim light filtering through the cracked vision slit. Move, Devereaux said. Not an order, not quite. Just a word. Just the suggestion that staying inside the tank wasn't an option anymore. We climbed out, legs shaking, hands trembling, bodies remembering how to move in spaces that weren't metal coffins. I pulled myself up through the loader's hatch. The cool evening air hit my face like a slap. Like Paris reminding me I was still alive, even though I felt like a ghost. I stood on the turret for a moment. Just stood there, looking. Place de l'Hôtel de Ville. This morning, it had been a square. Cobblestones, buildings, history. The kind of place where kings were crowned and revolutions were born and tourists took photographs. Now it was something else. The Panzer wreck still smoking. The turret lying in the street like a monument to violence. Shell craters, shattered windows. A cafe had been a cafe. Now just a skeleton of beams and broken furniture and dreams that wouldn't rebuild themselves. Bodies. Not many. The artillery had driven most of the Germans away. But enough. A resistance fighter slumped over the barricade. A German soldier face down in the gutter. The boy who'd thrown the rock, still there. Still small. Still 12 and dead and never going to be 13. And civilians. The ones who hadn't gotten clear fast enough. The ones caught by shrapnel or bullets or just bad luck and worse timing. A woman in a blue dress, an old man with white hair. Others. I stopped counting, stopped looking, stopped trying to make sense of mathematics that didn't add up no matter how you arrange the numbers. I jumped down from the tank. My boots hit cobblestones. Solid ground, real ground. Ground that wasn't moving or burning or trying to kill me. My legs almost gave out. I caught myself on the hull, pressed my forehead against the warm steel. It still smelled like cordite, like diesel, like everything we'd done to get here. You all right? Bertrand, standing next to me. Blood crusted on his face, eyes red, hands still shaking. No, I said. Good. Means you're honest. He pulled out a cigarette, tried to light it. His hands shook too much. The match kept missing. Finally got it. Drew deep, exhaled smoke that looked exactly like every other smoke in Paris right now. You did good, he said. I loaded shells and watched people die. That's the job. Then the job is shit. He almost smiled. Yeah, it is. Maurice was sitting on the front glacis, head in his hands. Not crying, just sitting. Just being somewhere other than the driver's seat where he'd steered us through hell and somehow come out the other side. Devereaux was talking to a resistance fighter. Giving report, pointing. His voice was professional. Calm. But I could see his hands. They were shaking too. We were all shaking, all pretending we were fine while falling apart in slow motion. I walked away from the tank. Didn't mean to. Body just moved, like it knew something my brain hadn't figured out yet. I walked toward Bernard. He was still lying where he fell. 50 meters from the burning Panzer wreck. 50 meters from the intersection he'd run across like he was bulletproof. Someone had closed his eyes. Someone had crossed his hands over his chest. Someone had tried to give him dignity in a place where dignity went to die. I knelt beside him, looked at his face. Older than I'd thought, weathered. The kind of face that had worked in sun and wind, that had lived through the invasion and the occupation and 4 years of waiting for this day. This moment. this chance to matter. And he'd taken it. He'd run at a Panzer with a bottle and fire and courage that I didn't understand, that I couldn't understand, that I would spend the rest of my life trying to understand and never quite getting there. Why? I asked. Didn't expect an answer. Dead men don't talk. But I asked anyway. Why did you do it? The wind moved through the square, carried smoke and dust and the smell of things burning, carried the sound of Paris waking up, of bells beginning to ring in the distance, of life remembering how to continue even when continuation seemed impossible. And I knew. He did it because someone had to. Because 300 people were about to die, and he could save them if he was willing to pay the price. Because liberation isn't clean, isn't glorious, isn't the thing they'll write about in history books or celebrate in parades. It's just arithmetic, addition and subtraction. One life for 300. The math worked even if the soul didn't. I stood up, walked back toward the tank, past resistance fighters emerging from cover, past civilians crying, past American infantry arriving from the north, fresh-faced and clean and still believing war was something noble. I climbed back onto the tank, sat on the turret, pulled my knees to my chest like I was 5 years old and scared of the dark. And I listened. The bells. Notre Dame first. Deep, resonant, the kind of sound that made your chest vibrate. Then others. Sacré-Cœur, Saint-Sulpice, Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Every church in Paris that still had bells to ring. They were ringing. Ringing for the first time in 4 years. Ringing like they believed everything we'd done was worth it. Ringing like tomorrow would be different. Ringing like the war was over instead of realizing it never ends. It just changes addresses and sends postcards home that say, "Wish you were here," when really it means, "I wish I wasn't." I thought about the boy who'd pointed toward the alley, about Marie with her Panzerfaust, about old Claude taking a rifle round through the throat, about Bernard running at a Panzer, about all the people who died today so Paris could hear these bells. And I realized something. Something that made my chest hurt and my eyes burn and my hands stop shaking because shaking required energy, and I had none left. I realized that I'd been carrying Africa wrong. The man who burned in that tank, I couldn't have saved him. The fire was too hot. The ammunition was cooking off. Opening that hatch would have killed us both. I knew that, had always known it. But knowing and believing are different countries, and I'd been stuck at the border for 4 years. But today I'd moved. When the Panzer aimed at those civilians, I'd loaded the gun. When Bernard ran, I'd fired when Devereaux ordered. When the infantry came, I'd pulled the trigger. I hadn't frozen, I'd chosen. And the choosing, the moving forward, even when every instinct screamed to stop. That was the only courage that mattered. Not the absence of fear, not the presence of certainty, just the willingness to act when acting was the only option left. Liberation wasn't a gift. It was a debt. And someone always had to pay it. But paying it, surviving it, living with it afterward, that wasn't punishment. It was just the price of being human in a world that kept demanding humanity even when humanity felt impossible. The bells kept ringing. Devereaux climbed up beside me. Sat. Didn't say anything. Just sat. 2 men on a broken tank listening to a city remember how to hope. "You think they'll remember us?" I asked. Same question as before, different meaning now. "Does it matter?" he replied. "I don't know." "Then let's assume it doesn't. Let's assume we're just doing what needed doing, nothing more, nothing less." That's not very poetic. War isn't poetry. War is work. Sometimes the work is ugly. Sometimes it costs more than it should. But it's still work. Still necessary. Still worth doing even when it breaks you. He stood up. Stretched. Winced. His back probably hurt. Everything probably hurt. We were all carrying wounds that didn't bleed, but never healed. "Come on," he said. "Let's find somewhere to sleep. Tomorrow we'll see if Paris still exists in daylight." I followed him down from the tank. The square was filling with people now. Resistance fighters, Americans, civilians emerging from cellars and hiding places. They were crying, hugging, singing, celebrating liberation like it was something pure instead of something we'd dragged through fire and blood to deliver. But maybe that was okay. Maybe they didn't need to know what it cost. Maybe the bill was ours to carry so they didn't have to. Maybe that was the point. A woman approached me, old, 70 at least. She grabbed my hand, kissed it, tears streaming down her face, said something in French I didn't quite catch. Thank you, maybe, or bless you, or something that meant the same thing in the language of gratitude. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Couldn't find words that fit the moment. She walked away. And I stood there in Place de l'Hôtel de Ville, listening to bells ring for a city that had forgotten what freedom sounded like. And I understood. Liberation wasn't the end of the war. It was just the moment when the war finally gave something back instead of just taking everything away. And maybe that was enough. Dawn came slowly. Like Paris wasn't sure it wanted to wake up. Like the city needed a few more hours of darkness to process what had happened, to count the cost, to decide if liberation was worth the price written in blood on cobblestones that had seen too much history already. I hadn't slept. None of us had. We'd found a cafe, half of one anyway, 3 blocks from Place de l'Hôtel de Ville. The windows were blown out, but the chairs still worked, and someone had found wine in the cellar. And we sat there in the dark, drinking and not talking, and listening to Paris remember how to breathe. Now, with dawn breaking, I walked back to the square. The tank was still there. Romilly. Sitting at an angle, right track thrown. Turret scarred from impacts that should have killed us, but didn't. Someone had draped a tricolor flag over the glacis plate. Someone else had left flowers on the hull. Roses, white ones, already wilting in the August heat that was starting to build. The bodies were gone, all of them. French, German, civilian, resistance. Someone had come in the night and collected them, carried them away to wherever the dead go when the fighting stops, gave them whatever dignity could be salvaged from the wreckage. But the blood remained. Dark stains on light stone, maps of violence, geographic markers of where people had been and stopped being. The rain would wash them away eventually. Time would fade them. But for now they were there. Reminders, receipts, proof that liberation wasn't clean and never would be. I climbed onto the tank one last time, sat on the turret, watched the sun come up over Paris, golden light touching rooftops first, then windows, then the street, illuminating a city that looked both ancient and newborn. Scarred but standing, broken but breathing. The bells were still ringing. Softer now, less frantic, like they'd gotten the urgent news out and could settle into something resembling normalcy. Like they were teaching Paris how to sound like itself again instead of the occupied silence it had worn for 4 years. People were emerging. Not many yet. Just a few. Old men walking slowly, looking at everything like they couldn't quite believe it was real. Women opening shutters, letting light into apartments that had been closed and dark and afraid. Children peeking out from doorways, not quite trusting that the street was safe. A bakery was opening. I could smell it. Bread, real bread, not the sawdust and ersatz flour the Germans had allowed. Real wheat, Real yeast, real heat from real ovens, baking real food for people who'd forgotten what real tasted like. The smell made my eyes burn, made me think about home, about the bakery on Rue de Seine where my mother used to buy croissants on Sunday mornings, about how simple things, bread and butter and coffee, had become symbols of resistance just by existing, by refusing to be erased, about how I might get to taste that bread again now that Paris was Paris again. Beautiful, isn't it? Bertrand, climbing up beside me, face cleaned up now, the blood washed away, but the cut above his eyebrow would scar. Something to remember this day by, something to carry forward. Which part? I asked. All of it. The sunrise, the bells, the fact that we're still here to see it. We killed a lot of people yesterday. We did. Good people died because we weren't fast enough. They did. Bernard, Marie, old Claude, the boy with the rock, all of them. Yes? He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, offered me one. I took it, even though I didn't smoke. Lit it from his. Drew deep. Coughed. He smiled. First one? He asked. Yeah. Good day for it. We sat there smoking, watching Paris wake up, watching the city decide whether to be grateful or angry or both. Watching liberation become real instead of just a word on a radio broadcast. You know what I keep thinking about? Bertrand said. What? All the people who didn't make it here, who died in North Africa or Italy or Normandy or any of the 100 places between there and here, who fought and bled and never got to see this, never got to hear these bells. That bother you? Every single day. Me too. Good. Means you're still human. He stood up, stretched, flicked his cigarette away. It landed in a puddle that might have been water, or might have been blood, or might have been both. Come on, he said. Devereaux says we're moving out. Column is pushing north. War isn't over just because Paris is free. Where are we going? Germany, eventually. But first, we have to get there. In what tank? He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was strange in the morning quiet. Strange, but good. Like proof that joy still existed even after everything. They're bringing up a replacement. Some poor bastard Sherman that made it through yesterday without getting its track chewed to hell. He paused. They're calling her Marseille, after the one that burned. Marseille. The tank behind us. The one that took the Panzerfaust. The one where no one climbed out. That feel wrong to you? I asked. Everything about this feels wrong. But we do it anyway because the alternative is worse. He climbed down, disappeared into the growing crowd of soldiers and civilians and people trying to figure out what came next. I took one last look at Paris, at the buildings standing, at the smoke still rising from a dozen fires that hadn't quite burned out, at the flag flying over Hôtel de Ville, at the people starting to fill the streets, at the city that had survived occupation and resistance and liberation and would somehow survive whatever came next. And I realized I'd been asking the wrong question all along. Not, was it worth it? That was unanswerable. Incalculable. The kind of moral algebra that had no solution because the variables kept changing and the constants weren't constant, and someone always got subtracted no matter how you arranged the equation. The real question was simpler. Can I live with what I did? And the answer was that I had to. Because Bernard and Marie and old Claude and all the others who paid the bill couldn't live with it. They'd paid in full, given everything, left the living to carry the weight. So I would carry it, would shoulder it, would walk forward with it, pressing down on my spine and my soul and my sleep for however many years I had left. Not because I wanted to, because I owed them. Because they'd given me a future by giving up theirs. Because the bells were ringing and someone had to be alive to hear them. I climbed down from the tank, walked away from Romley, walked toward whatever came next. Behind me, the bells kept ringing. Notre Dame, Sacré-Cœur, Saint-Sulpice. Every church in Paris singing the same song, the same truth, the same message that had taken 4 years and rivers of blood and mountains of courage to deliver. You are free. You are free. You are free. And when the bells rang, I realized the war had given me back a city, but taken the man I used to be, the man who'd left for North Africa believing in glory and honor and clean victories. That man was gone, buried somewhere between Tobruk and Tunisia and Paris. What remained was something else, something harder, something scarred, something that had learned the terrible lesson that survival isn't victory, and victory isn't clean, and clean doesn't exist when people are dying. But something that could still hear bells, could still smell bread baking, could still feel sunlight on skin and know that warmth was real, even when everything else felt like shadow. I walked through the streets of Paris. The city was waking. And so was I. Not the same man who'd arrived yesterday. Not the same man who'd frozen in Africa. Just a man who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the willingness to move forward when moving forward broke you. And I was broken. But I was moving. And maybe that was enough. The bells kept ringing. I kept walking. And Paris breathed.